Welcome to the Sprint 2 demo of the Spring 2022 Pod Reshare Workcycle. My name is Corey Lown, and I'm the tech lead for this workcycle. I'm joined today by the rest of the development team, and we're going to demonstrate the work we've completed during our second sprint. Pod Aggregator is an open source system to aggregate MARC, bibliographic, and holdings data for institutions that participate in the Pod initiative. The purpose of this workcycle is to build on the work of the 2020 workcycle. Our goals are to bring Pod to a production state, improve the user interface, refine the data contribution and consumption experience, and build out functionality needed for Pod Aggregator to serve as a data source for Project Reshare. During the sprint, we focused on incremental user interface and application improvements, fixing a variety of bugs, and providing support for data contributors. Now I'll hand things over to Marlo to demonstrate some of the user interface changes we made this sprint.
This work cycle, we changed the way icons are handled technically in the application and unified our approach. We are now using the Bootstrap icon library. There are icons all over the app, but one of the main places you'll see them are here in the uploaded files table view. Notice the legend up top, and in this example, all of the uploads were successful. Here on my local machine, I can demonstrate the icons for various states of success or failure for the uploads. Another improvement we made this round was to the layout of the user profile page. We broke the possible editing actions into 3 sections for better usability and clarity in the interface. Previously, users reported that they were unable to change their passwords, when in fact this was due to a misunderstanding in the UI. This better organized layout should prevent such issues and make it easier for users going forward. So moving on, you'll notice that in the top bar, we have a link to providers. Previously, we had labeled this as organizations. A lot of the work we did this work cycle was to clarify the interface and labels. So using the term providers more directly engages data providers and better signals what type of information lives at this link. Moving into the providers link, we can see 2 graphs. Previously, we were loading this charting library slightly wrong so that it was violating our content security policy in the Rails application. This caused the charts to sometimes not load at all and to throw errors. So with this fix, the charts should consistently load going forward.
Hey, I'm Nick, developer on the Access team at Stanford. We noticed during this sprint that some pages that listed many uploaded files were slow to load in the browser, so we added some simple pagination controls at the bottom of the upload list. You can see this in action by viewing the stream for any organization with a lot of uploaded files, like Duke. We also found that bots were using the sign-up functionality of the site to create user accounts. So as a security measure, we restricted account creation so that only administrators can invite users to join the Pod Aggregator as part of an organization. Along the same lines, we took a look at the existing user accounts and decided that users need to be affiliated with a Pod data contributor or consumer organization in order to have an account on the site moving forward. To bring the data into line with this, we matched existing user accounts without an organization to their appropriate institution, and we cleaned up any other accounts that are left on the server.
All right, this is Corey again. We made a few other changes and improvements to the application this sprint. Because of the importance of the default stream, we've removed the ability for any user to delete a stream that is set as the default. This is to prevent accidental deletion of the default stream that could negatively impact downstream consumers of the data in Pod. You'll notice that the destroy button is not present for the stream that is set as the default. We also received feedback that the job tracker displayed on each organization's page in Pod was difficult to understand. We've made changes to the design to provide a summary of the number of jobs currently being processed, as well as the number of jobs that might have failed. The list of jobs can be expanded to see more detail. We also identified a need to distinguish between organizations that are both providers and consumers of data in Pod and organizations that will only consume data from pod. To support this, we've added an attribute to organizations that identifies whether the organization is a data provider. This will enable us to tailor the user interface to these two distinct uses of pod. These changes are forthcoming. During the sprint, we investigated and fixed bugs that had been identified after the last work cycle. During testing of the API, it was found that making a request with an invalid authentication token returned an HTTP 500 internal server error. We made changes this sprint so that the server now responds to an API request with an invalid token with a more appropriate HTTP 401 unauthorized response. It had also previously been reported that loading the normalized inner stream delete file was very slow. During our investigation, we also found that the implementation could, under certain circumstances, During our investigation, we also found that the implementation could, under certain conditions, incorrectly calculate deletes. After some discussion, we decided to remove the inner stream delete file based on our current understanding of the use of streams and the resource sync API. We continue to refine and make changes to the pod documentation that can be found on the pod aggregator GitHub wiki. During this sprint, we documented how a data providing institution can use a non-default named stream to test sending data to pod without negatively impacting downstream consumers of the data. As data contributors start to send more data to pod, we have provided support for questions and issues reported by data contributors. During this sprint, we investigated the cause of a failed MARC profiling job and answered questions about a record count discrepancy and a question about use of the pod API. Thanks for watching this demonstration of the work we've completed during Sprint 2 of the pod reshare work cycle. We look forward to sharing with you what we accomplished during Sprint 3.